This is APH Access Academy, and today we are revisiting the product Building on Patterns, but this time looking at it through the lens of how an itinerant teacher of students with visual impairments can best utilize it. Today we will be sharing ideas and solutions as we explore strategies for literacy achievement. Our presenter today is APH's Braille Literacy Product Manager, Hunter Summerlin. She brings a wealth of background of experience of teaching a variety of students across many levels of ability. She is also actively engaged with focusing on curriculum instruction for her doctoral studies. At the end of our time together, our learners' objectives that we hope that we will achieve is that when you walk away, you will have identified effective ways to use Building on Patterns literacy product within an itinerant service delivery model, that you'll be able to describe ways to tailor Building on Patterns lessons to meet student unique needs, and that you'll be able to describe how to use this product as a supplemental resource for general education instruction. And Hunter, thank you so much for returning and being willing to share these things that we want to consider when teaching Braille.
Thank you so much for having me here today, Amy, and all of you who are watching me from your various home or work locations. I so greatly appreciate the opportunity to extend this discussion in a way that benefits those of you in the field who need more information about Braille literacy and applying one of our most longstanding and popular products, Building on Patterns, to an itinerant model. Because we all know an itinerant model just has a lot of unique facets. So I look forward to addressing those today. And we're just kind of diving right in. The first thing I'd really like to discuss with you guys is a literacy-rich environment for your learners, why that's important, and what is that? So let's talk about that briefly. So a literacy-rich environment fosters all four domains of language, not just reading and writing, but also speaking and listening. It's also an environment with a lot of meaningful and abundant engagement with Braille. Now you might think, oh, I've heard of this so often as a literacy-rich environment being an ocular-centric, print-focused kind of thing. Well, yes, historically, I think that is the context in which we are most familiar with the concept of a literacy-rich environment as educators. However, the principles apply to creating a literacy-rich environment for either your dual media or your Braille learners as well. So a literacy-rich environment is also a setting that stimulates students, especially with visually impairments in this setting, to participate in language and literacy activities in their daily lives and interweaving those so that they are able to develop the beginning understandings of the utility of function of not just oral language, but also Braille and Braille writing. So children are engaged in a variety of Braille reading and writing activities in a literacy-rich environment. You might have some students in groups and some working individually on different activities that are literacy focused. A lot of us think of this as like more of a school for the blind kind of classroom where you would have a literacy-rich environment for the entire classroom. But if you're a teacher of the visually impaired following an itinerant model or a resource model, this also applies to you. You can also support the development of a literacy-rich environment for your learner, even though it's not your classroom. I know you kind of have to tread lightly there, but there are ways that you can support the development of a literacy-rich environment as an itinerant even, so that students can explore various genres, not just in the library or during reading time, but throughout their day. and not just explore particular content, but content across all of the core areas, including science, math, and social studies. So just an example of a literacy-rich environment for a Braille learner, that might be if you had the concept of weather that was being studied in the classroom. Some of the things that you could do as a TVI is to provide Braille books on weather and provide those for your student to access. You could also make some Braille labels for around the classroom and display weather-related vocabulary. You could also create learning opportunities surrounding kind of the lexicon of weather. You could build a word wall for not only your Braille learners, but also your print readers to enjoy, and listing that content such as rainbows and clouds in the lexicon of what might be weather. You can also sing songs about the weather, have a student keep a Braille weather journal and document the conditions each day and just kind of observe and support using all of those senses that they have access to in gaining information about the weather. And then you can also create graphs of the daily temperature. So you can really pick any theme that the general education teacher might be using or that might be studied in the classroom and just really dig in and facilitate literacy and language activities for your Braille reader or your dual media learner. Okay, so I'm going to kind of reel myself back in and go back to the product, which is building on patterns. So let's do a little bit of a product overview. So we had a webinar back in May, and we kind of went over just the general structure of building on patterns, which is also known as BOP, or some people call it BOP. And it is a complete primary literacy program designed to teach students the Braille Code and reading skills at the same time. The content is sequenced. It's divided into grade levels. There are daily lessons organized, and there are unit topics that are discussed. So if we think about the big five, these are areas that science has told us that are especially important for the development of literacy skills and the betterment of our Braille readers. The big five are interwoven throughout the BOP series, and those include phonemic awareness, phonics, reading comprehension, fluency, and vocabulary. Okay, let's talk for a minute about teaching Braille within an itinerant service delivery atmosphere. So being an itinerant is kind of its own beast. You have all of these very wonderful, beautiful, very different students. There is a huge range of the kind of kid who might be on an itinerant TVIs caseload. You might have a student who is 6 years old with a cortical visual impairment, with multiple disabilities, who spends all of their time in a separate setting. And you might have a 21-year-old student who's working through the occupational course of study and is a low vision student who relies a lot on technology for magnification. And you might have a child who's a 7th grader who's using Braille as their primary reading medium. You just have this huge range, and it can be a challenge to meet the needs of the huge variety of types of kids on your caseload, not to mention fitting in 7 schools in one day, not to mention not really being able to use resources over and over again because your students are so different. They all kind of require that you plan your own things. So being an itinerant TVI is just its own kind of beast. It's a very unique situation. It's a unique way to be an educator. And I really loved it, but it's also challenging. Everyone who's been a TVI knows how challenging being a TVI can be. So some of the realities that we face when we think about particularly Braille literacy instruction and fostering our students' Braille literacy needs is that sometimes there's a lack of follow through from the other educators and staff. We've all been there. We've all experienced times when we've made the beautiful resources, we've taught the general education teacher and the student's case manager and the paraprofessional and the teaching assistant and the occupational therapist, and this huge team has access to everything that you've made and spent hours on assembling, and you've showed them every piece of every game and every Braille flashcard, and you've aligned it with all of the topics that they told you that they would be reviewing in the first few weeks of school. And you spent hours and hours and days preparing all of that. And then when the rubber meets the road, sometimes not all of those things get used in the way that we intended. So sometimes there is a lack of follow through from other members of the team, perhaps. And this is not a pointing fingers kind of thing. It's just that I think as TVIs, we're profoundly comfortable with the things that we've created and the solutions that we've made. And we love our Braille and we just have all of these hopes and dreams. But sometimes it's hard for other people to carry it on to the extent and to the level and with the enthusiasm that we have, because it's really our thing. So there's a little bit of incongruity there sometimes, and it can be a challenge for our students with their literacy development and building those skills. Also, there are huge gaps in TVI literacy training. I have encountered a lot of variance in the types of opportunities and the types of coursework that TVIs have been exposed to. And this is just one of those things that illustrates how different educator preparation programs are. So some grad programs are really strong and they offer lots of literacy training. Some not so much. Some TVIs have taken it upon themselves to seek out lots of literacy training and lots of additional opportunities for professional development to assist their learners. And that's fantastic. But what people know cannot be generalized. There's just a huge amount of variation there. So that's the reality that we face. Not everyone has the same background knowledge. And we have to be able to work with that to provide the best solutions so that our students' literacy skills can grow. Also, limited amounts of time with our students. We have all been there. We have all experienced challenges with getting IEP teams to believe that the amount of time it takes to teach Braille is just a huge amount of time. I believe the latest research tells us that 2 hours a day, 5 days a week is just what we need to teach a student Braille. And we have to teach them all of the math and abacus and expanded core curriculum and all of the other things. And we just run out of time. There's not enough time in the world. If you're an itinerant also, once you leave that school, your opportunity is kind of ended, and you have to be reliant on the follow through from other members of that student's team. And sometimes that's pretty easy and that goes well. A lot of times it's a big challenge to get people to kind of pick up where you left off and feel comfortable and know how to use the materials that you've left with that student. And not because they're not wonderful. Paraprofessionals and occupational therapists and other members of that student's team can be absolutely fantastic and so interested in watching that student grow and evolve and achieve their own best potential. But the reality is that it's just hard to have that education continue when the TVI leaves that building for that student. Okay. Another reality that we as TVIs face is that there are minimal opportunities to collaborate with a general education teacher. So very often as a former TVI, I had, maybe 11 different elementary schools on my caseload, and covering such a huge terrain did not allow me to participate in every planning session, every PLC, every opportunity that I would have liked to engage in with that general education teacher, just because when they were having their PLC, when they were having the second grade team planning, when they were having the after school staff meeting, I was still at other schools doing things with other students. So it's just, these things are challenging. It's really hard to align your schedule in a way that allows you to collaborate with every teacher who probably would benefit from the collaboration of the TVI. So we know the problems, and I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. So let's talk about some solutions to those issues. So one of the issues we mentioned was educator follow through. Some of the things that we can do that help kind of bridge that communication gap is to schedule biweekly meetings with that general education or special education teacher on an automatic schedule. So just block off, Tuesdays at 2 or whatever they can do, if at all possible, and devote that time to a collaboration with them and plan for a roundtable with them. That's something to put on your happy face for, be excited about benefiting your student, being excited about bolstering their performance, have some ideas. Make sure you ask them questions about their interests, why they became a teacher, what they're excited about in the next several weeks. Overall, you can emphasize the need for a collaborative partnership. Oftentimes, Braille can be this really big, scary, unknown kind of thing to members of the IEP team. So one of the ways to kind of make it more approachable, make people more comfortable if they don't have the kinds of background and education that a TVI has, is to become a collaborative partner. Emphasize that the student will benefit from us being in this together. We're a team. We can do it together. We're going to be the literacy family who educates this student. Also, I think it's always helpful to understand motivation for adults and how that really works. So I try to keep it as positive as I can when I interact with other members of the IEP team or other members of the student's teaching team, whether it's the speech pathologist, the occupational therapist, the paraprofessional, or the grade level teacher. Just know that adults are most motivated by building this kind of positive foundation. I really like some of the principles of Stephen Covey and his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the first educational environments I ever taught in was a Covey school. And one of the concepts that became very valuable to me in my teaching practice and in my life just as a human being who wishes to be successful, is the idea that we all have an emotional bank account. And in every interaction with another human, you're making either deposits or withdrawals from that emotional bank account. So every time you purchase something from a coworker's child's fundraiser, you buy that Yankee candle that you really don't need, you're making a positive deposit into that emotional bank account, so that when it comes time for withdrawal, which is inevitable, especially in a K-12 environment, these withdrawals are inevitable. When it comes time for that, you're not bankrupt and your balance isn't in the negative. You have some cushion there. Okay, so one of the challenges that we as TVIs face is the huge variation in the amount and the type of literacy training that we have. So in order to improve the literacy training that's out there and available to us to utilize, there's an upcoming Hive course titled Unlocking the Foundations of Reading for Students with Visual Impairments. I would encourage you to register and to enroll and participate in that course, and you will be exposed to some critical content. There's also the Ohio Center for Autism and Low Incidence course, and it is titled Literacy Access for All. Also, the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction offers a course titled Preparation for Foundation of Reading Licensure Exam. I know you're thinking, that is so random. Why would she give us a North Carolina Department of Public Instruction resource? This is free, and you will get free CEUs for doing this. You will also get the content, which is critical in improving your own teaching practice and broadening your foundational knowledge of literacy and literacy practices. So that's another free resource. You don't have to be licensed in North Carolina. You don't have to live in North Carolina. Anyone can create an account and access that. If there's something that I say that you don't understand or you need a link for or whatever, feel free to email me. My email is at the beginning of the PowerPoint. It's Summerlin, SUMMERLIN @aph.org. And I will be happy to help you. PBS Learning Media is also a great resource for CEUs. I cannot guarantee that they will always have a professional development opportunity aligned with literacy and literacy training, but often they have quality content, and sometimes they have literacy opportunities available on their site as well. And that's another free resource. So those are ways that you can improve your practice and learn more about literacy. Okay, the amount of instructional time that we have as TVIs with our students is a challenge for sure. We have so much to teach and such little time. And we have this huge variety of IEP goals. And there's just not enough time in the world to teach. I always felt like a student with a visual impairment, everything that student with a visual impairment needed to know. So ways that you can mitigate this factor as a barrier is to include parents and caregivers. Dialogue with parents and caregivers whenever they're available about what you're doing, where you're going next, what their performance is like, opportunities for being literacy rich at home. But that's an opportunity for you to extend the learning beyond the instructional time that you have during the school day. Parent letters are available on the BOP website. APH BOP which is bop.org, is the Building on Patterns website for the different levels of building on patterns. There are parent letters available, which kind of provide information about what the student is learning in that level or that section of lessons. In identifying the amount of instructional time as a barrier and trying to mitigate that and move towards solutions, we also need to understand the role of the IEP team. We can ask the IEP team for more time, but perhaps if we present needs and data, perhaps we can obtain more instructional time if that's what the student needs. I'm not saying that every student with a visual impairment always needs more time working towards individualized instruction and IEP goals with their teacher of the visually impaired. It's not a for sure thing that everyone needs. Not everyone needs an increase. We have people who are exiting. We have people who are kind of at a stasis point and they're doing okay. But if you need more time and you know in your heart of hearts and you have the data to support that need for an increase, you can ask the IEP team and see if that could be increased. Okay, so let's move on. So general education collaboration is another potential area for hiccups, but the ways that we can reduce challenges and enhance collaboration are as follows. We can share lesson plans, perhaps on a digital storage such as a cloud. We can send home and share reading pacing guides and let those be an area of dialogue and collaboration and conversation among providers in dealing with the student. And we can develop a familiarity with state standards. So let's talk about how we have an opportunity using the product Building on Patterns to tailor instruction to meet our very unique students' needs. So we've talked a little bit about our student audience. And I want you in your mind to think about more of our Braille readers on our caseload than our students with low vision who are not dual media learners, or our students with cortical visual impairment who are not going to learn Braille. So let's think about our Braille learners. So a Braille reader can be this huge range of things. And because there is just an extreme amount of variation in what a Braille reading student might look like, we have to tailor that instruction, which BOP allows us to do. And we can have considerations that are an active part of our decision-making in providing instruction for a student. We can think about that student's age. Braille literacy for a 5-year-old and a 15-year-old will probably look a lot different. We can think about developmental levels. Sometimes we have students who might be chronologically 10, but they're developmentally more aligned with the abilities and interests of a 5-year-old. Or they are chronologically 14 and developmentally 14. Sometimes both of those levels are perfectly in alignment. But developmental levels should certainly be a consideration when we're planning Braille literacy activities and instruction for our learners. Student interests are a vital consideration. You get a lot further if students are reading about things that they enjoy reading about. I had, as a little segue, I had a really amazing 10th grade English teacher in high school. She was just so cool. And I remember kind of having a bad experience in the past with a teacher assigning me a topic, and I had to write a report on trout fishing. I have no interest in trout fishing. To this day, I've never been trout fishing. Trout fishing is not appealing to me. It's just not my thing. So how well did I do on that paper about trout fishing? Not well. I didn't do well at all because it's not my thing. I'm not interested in it. And so this 10th grade English teacher, I approached her. I was still kind of traumatized from getting a bad grade on this paper that I was perfectly capable of writing, but just hated the material that I needed to write. And so I did pretty poorly, which was shocking to me because I'm, a pretty big nerd, even when I was a kid. And I was used to making good grades. So I described to her the scenario and kind of said, look, do you assign paper topics or, and she said no, because the extent to which you will do well aligns with the extent to which you like that topic. And of course, we can't always have students read about things that they select. You're going to have to read about volcanoes in Africa and fiction, and you're going to have to read a haiku, and you're just going to have to expand your background knowledge and perhaps build interests. But when possible, if it's appropriate, we have the ability to focus on our students' interests and use that as a springboard and a conversation starter and an entry point, perhaps, for our Braille literacy instruction. Background matters a lot. The background of the student is key. So if you have students from Eastern North Carolina, for example, where I am, you might be able to talk about hurricanes since we have one every year. That might be familiar to them. That might be something that they can contribute to a conversation about. That might be another entry point, a springboard, a jump off spot for some really beautiful instruction to happen. We have to consider the amount of vision that the student has. And I know you're thinking, well, it's Braille, they don't really need to see it. And that's true. That's true. Braille is not ocular centric. It's awesomely accessible. But if you have a student who had vision at one point in life, you might be able to describe things in a way that they could understand, having remembered it at a time when they had vision. So that might be an opportunity to maximize. Congenital versus adventitious vision loss is a factor in planning our instruction for a student audience when we're thinking about Braille literacy. So our congenitally blind students will have a different experience than our adventitiously blind students. With adventitious vision loss, so that's not vision loss that you were born with, vision loss that happens, whether it's through a disease process or as a result of an injury, the student will have a different experience than if they were born blind. Culture is also a factor. One of the things that I loved about my caseload as a former TVI is that I had a huge variation of ethnic groups and religious practices, and it led to some really unique learning opportunities for me. Acknowledging a student's culture is essential. I think of culture as beliefs and practices. Culture is the kind of thing that dictates that I wear business professional clothing during this encounter rather than wearing a prom dress. Culture is really interesting. It affects so so much of our day, and it affects our learning and our teaching practice. So acknowledging the student's culture and exploring that, if it's not something that's familiar to you, is an opportunity for Braille literacy to be tailored to that individual. Okay, so let's talk about a story. I'm going to go back to the last slide. I'm sorry. So there is a story in building patterns called My Pug Pub, and it is a story that I ended up having to tailor and modify for my student. And I will go into more of that in just a moment. I'm so very excited and thrilled to share some student videos with you. And that is coming up shortly. So, okay. Part of the challenge, not really a challenge, but part of an opportunity for Bob, is that it's intended for an early elementary age group. So the stories are focused on topics and experiences aligned with that age group. Hence the title, My Pug Pub. Older students may not find those topics as relevant to them. You have, Zach and Katie and Recess and the Little Red Wagon and all of that. And if you have an older student, they might think, I haven't really been interested in a Little Red Wagon in a long time. It's just not my thing. Or I haven't been to Recess in a really long time. I'm in the 8th grade now. So that's not really relevant to me. So Bob allows us to have an opportunity to make the stories meaningful to older students. And I want to encourage you to, replace the names with a favorite character or object or whatever they're into. Develop an experience-based story. Modify it in terms of generating a word list, such as pet words. You could talk about the name of their pet. If they don't have, experience with a dog, or they might not have pets at all, but their latest thing is chinchillas, then you can make a name for that chinchilla. You can talk about the size and the color, how you would enjoy that pet, where that pet might be, where they live. Is that a pet that you can physically pet and stroke and cuddle with? Who's the owner? Do they like a particular brand of food? What are the toys that a chinchilla would play with? So these are all opportunities for you as an instructor. Okay, so I'm super tickled to introduce you to a very special young friend of mine. For those who might benefit from a little bit more description, I have a slide right now. It's labeled Student Profile. On the left, it says Meet Drew. On right below that, there is a picture of a teenage male who has black glasses and a green shirt. He has brown hair and he's looking slightly down. There are some balloons in the background and he's in his family's home. And then on the right is a heading that says Drew's Early Start. And you see a picture of a really premature infant who's certainly a micropreemie, weighs about 2 pounds, who is lying on his stomach, who is born so early that he's covered in this kind of downy fur, with some medical tubing coming from his body. And in this picture, the baby's arm is outstretched and his father's wedding band fit over his hand, over his wrist, up his forearm, and almost to his elbow. And probably they could have put it even higher up his arm because he was such a tiny baby. But now that you have the descriptions of the two pictures, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Drew. He's this great, great, great kid, and he's a former student of mine. He's currently 17. Drew is a wonderful human being, and he has a wonderful family. There's so many different things that I love about him. One of the things I love about him the most is that he gives me his best effort. He will go on a learning adventure with me. He will try new things. He may not always love every single thing I ever planned as his TVI, but 99% of the time, he would at least dip his toe in and try. And that just, if all of our students gave their best effort and tried every time we presented a game, a reading activity, right, whatever, assistive technology, whatever it is, then, we would have kids just, it would be much different. So, okay, let me reel it in. I get so excited talking about him. I get kind of off track, but Drew is a student who doesn't necessarily fit into this really pretty box. He's a beautiful person. And so many of our students are absolutely magnificent, but they're not just one thing. Drew has autism in addition to a visual impairment. I met Drew for the first time in middle school, and he had been exposed to Braille a little bit. He had had a recent failed eye surgery, and he was profoundly photosensitive. Drew was having difficulty accessing print, and although he had been exposed to Braille a little bit, I felt like it would really benefit him to just open up the world of Braille to Drew. Drew's visual impairment results from being such a premature baby. He was in the NICU for months and months. He has retinopathy of prematurity, or ROP, and has had a detached retina. There was an attempt to fix the retina and reattach it surgically. That unfortunately did not work. So Drew has really embraced Braille, and Braille is a part of Drew's life. So I think Drew is a really excellent candidate to kind of discuss building on patterns with you and highlight some of the flexibility that we as educators have with this awesome product. When you have a student like Drew and you're thinking about, your options with federal quota funds, BOP comes to mind because you can use your federal quota funds to purchase BOP. But then you're thinking, okay, he's 17. So how are we going to make it work for him? And I'm about to show you some of that. Okay, so lesson tailoring. This is an activity that comes directly from Building on Patterns, first grade, Unit 1, Lesson 3. And this was a reading activity. Here's a little story called My Pug Pub. And this is snipped directly from Building on Patterns. Okay, here is My Pug Pup. If I was going to read it here, well, I am going to read it. So I'll read it to you. I have a new pup. My pup is tan with a black mask. It is a pug pup. A pug is little. It will not get very big. It is a good pet for a little home. It is good with kids. It is a good pet for me. Okay, so you get kind of a feel for that story. You're building a lexicon of what a pup is, what a pug specifically is, what the features of a pug might be. But, Drew is 17. I'm going to go back to my pug book. Drew was not particularly interested in this story as it exists. which was a surprise for me because I had this whole thing planned. Drew has a couple of dogs. They're the loves of his life. They're kind of spoiled rotten and treated well, and he interacts with them beautifully. They're a big part of his day. They're a big part of his family's life, and he talks about them all the time. And recently he has a newer, I guess, puppy named Snoop. And so I modified my Pug Pub to be my dog Snoop. And of course, when you modify building on patterns, stories, I just want to make you aware quickly, you'll change a little bit of the scope and sequence. You'll, perhaps introduce a comma where there wasn't a comma before. You'll have to be aware of the new set of learning opportunities that you're giving to your learner, because you might include some different contractions based on your word choice. So that's something to kind of make a mental note of and file away. But, I had this beautiful story planned out. I wrote this about Snoop. I modified it to be about Drew's dog Snoop, and Drew was having absolutely none of that because Drew spent some time with his older cousins recently and is now into wizards and Harry Potter. So dogs are out, wizards are in, and the instruction needed to be modified accordingly. So I changed the story to be my wizard friend, Bob. This is not in building on patterns. This is something that I kind of wrote as a result of Drew's change in interest, so that I could illustrate this to you as an opportunity to modify the content as needed, perhaps for the needs of an older learner or when your students' interests change overnight. So my wizard friend, Bob, here's the story. My friend is a wizard and he has a wand. His name is Bob. Do you like that name? Is it a good name for a wizard friend? I like Bob's wand. This wizard is my friend. I can hang with Bob and his wand. So that's an example of modifying the content and tailoring the instruction to meet the unique Braille literacy needs of your student. Let's talk about some supplementary resources. Scarboroughs reading rope is a conceptual tool that allows us to gain an understanding of the interaction of language comprehension and word recognition to then create skilled readers and reading comprehension. So here's a graphic. At the top, you will see individual strands of, you could think of it as twine or rope or yarn. So you have individual strands and they're being twisted together. And at the top, it's labeled language comprehension. Let's talk about what language comprehension is briefly for those of us who might need a little refresher, or if you just need the information. Language comprehension includes things like background knowledge about facts and concepts, vocabulary, such as the precise vocabulary that you would need, the breadth of your vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, including metaphors and inferences, as well as literacy knowledge, such as genre and print concepts and features. So that is encompassed within language comprehension, which is represented at the top of this conceptual model labeled Scarboroughs reading rope, and language comprehension is at the top. You are twisting the individual strands together to join with the strands that come together from word recognition. And word recognition includes phonological awareness, such as phonological awareness encompasses things like syllables, phonemes, which are individual units of speech sound. Then you have decoding, which is part of word recognition, and that is understanding alphabetic principle as well as sound letter correspondence. Then you have also within the lexicon of word recognition and what that means, you have sight recognition of familiar words. So in this conceptual model, language comprehension, and word comprehension have individual strands twisting together into two ropes that eventually join into a much thicker rope where the skilled reading happens and reading comprehension looms. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the reading strands. Let's talk about language comprehension. Language comprehension, as I said, can be vocabulary instruction. This is part of how we build language comprehension. Vocabulary is extremely important. And I think because of the unique needs of our students and their sensory issues, vocabulary instruction is a huge challenge at times. Not only do we have students who cannot physically see a dolphin, for example, if the word is dolphin, I'll use it for this example to illustrate this concept. If the word is dolphin, we know that our students can't see it. Even if they are the wealthiest child from the wealthiest family who's been on all the trips, who's been to SeaWorld, who's been to Dolphin's Cove, who's done all of this, they can't see the dolphin. So we have to figure out ways to overcome that sensory deficit in order to build vocabulary. Then we have the challenges that all instructors have. All instructors have students who are perhaps faced with poverty. Poverty profoundly affects vocabulary because if you have fewer opportunities to experience life due to limited finances, then you're not going to be exposed to the same volume of words and concepts and principles. So, high poverty kids don't get to go to SeaWorld. It's just not part of the options in their life. So they're not going to have the experience with the dolphin. And our population still has the visual impairment, so we're still combating that. Then, uniquely over time, America is a beautiful place that changes and has a lot of multiculturalism, and I loved embracing that as the TVI. And probably a third of my caseload had an ELL or English language learner designation, meaning that if I went to their home and was a fly on the wall, I would hear a language that is not English. What that language was varied from home to home, but about 30% of my students had an ELL designation due to speaking Spanish at home. So dolphin, I don't even know what dolphin is in Spanish. Bonus points to whoever can put the Spanish word for dolphin in the chat. Let's see who can do it. I can't see the chat. Other people can. I wouldn't know if you're correct. You could say almost anything in Spanish, and I would not know the word for dolphin. But you also have language barriers to consider in building. They might know exactly what a dolphin is, but they know the Spanish word for dolphin instead. So let's look at background knowledge. Background knowledge and vocabulary instruction are intertwined for sure. The more background knowledge we have about a topic, the greater likelihood that our vocabulary will be larger in the lexicon of whatever the topic is. Literacy knowledge and language structures go hand in hand. Language structures refer more to syntax and such. Literacy knowledge, again, is more like genre as well as print concepts. Verbal reasoning is also quite important. Inference is one of the biggest skills that I had to work on as a teacher of the visually impaired with my learners. It seems like students just globally struggle with inference. Inference is defined as the skill that allows us to metaphorically read between the lines. So a story might not explicitly say this story takes place outside, but if you're talking about, if you're reading a story about a girl who's walking through the grass who bends over and picks up a leaf from the ground. We know that that's outside. We're not going to have a story that takes place inside in which those things occur. But again, it wasn't stated explicitly in that story. So inference is the skill that allows us to put that piece together, even without it being directly and explicitly stated. And I find that students, not only with students with visual impairments, but students globally struggle with that. So that's an area that we can focus on in order to improve language comprehension. Word recognition is the other half of Scarborough's reading rope. So let's talk about phonological awareness and phonics first. So I think globally, it can be challenging for us to understand the differences between phonological awareness and phonics. And then you often hear phonemic awareness. So I'll briefly kind of tease out all three and explain what they are. Okay, so I want us to think about the word clock. Okay, with phonological awareness, I'm going to hear the word clock. I can think about rhyme. What rhymes with clock? What sound does clock start with? And that's all kind of auditory. Phonics is then kind of elevating that phonological awareness experience to seeing the written word. You pronounce each phoneme, which is an individual unit of speech sound. So k is the first phoneme in clock. And then you blend all of the sounds to say the word. Phonemic awareness is hearing those individual sounds, k, l, ah, k, and then blending it to make the word clock. You also have sight recognition. Sight words are something that's discussed, I think, a lot less in teaching students with visual impairments. But I think it's still relevant because we can take words from the adult sight words list, such as the word all, A-L-L. Well, if I were a student and I were decoding that for the first time, it would be important to know that that double L is pronounced as an individual sound. I don't have to say ah-la-la. Ah-la-la. It's how a student being taught to read in this country would decode all. Sight words are not words that you can decode and have them make sense based on sound letter correspondence. You just have to kind of learn the unique pronunciation of that word. Okay, so in building on patterns, there are opportunities for vocabulary instruction, such as the covering of antonyms. And this is an activity from first grade, Unit 7, Lesson 39. The words at the top of the page are sad, little, wet, sleepy, smile, up, over, left, back, and out. And then the student is given, and these are all Braille activities, of course, numbers 1 through 10. And they are in, dry, happy, under, front, big, awake, frown, down, and right. So the goal for this activity would be, for example, in number 1, you would use your reading skills to read the word in, and then antonyms are words that have different or opposing meanings. So you would go to the word bank and want the student to produce the word out. In and out are opposites or antonyms, and so forth for the rest of the page. So building on patterns provides opportunity for vocabulary instruction. Also, there are opportunities for literacy knowledge, such as silly poems, which comes from second grade, Unit 1, Lesson 5. I'll just go ahead and read the excerpt, which is Silly Poems 3 Limericks by Edward Lear. There was an old man with a beard who said, "It is just as I feared. 2 owls and a hen, 4 larks and a wren have all built their nests in my beard. There was an old person of Dover who rushed through a blue field of clover, but some very large bees stung his nose and his knees. So he very soon went back to Dover. There was a young lady whose chin resembled the point of a pin. So she had it made sharp and purchased a harp and played several tunes with her chin." Okay. This emphasizes literacy knowledge, and you will have to have a discussion of what a limerick is with your student. And I think it's fantastic that our students get exposed to limericks, because so often I think students with visual impairments have less exposure to some of the literacy opportunities than as their non-disabled peers do. So having that breadth of different types of literacy experience not only builds their literacy knowledge, but you can also attribute it to having a literacy-rich environment for the student. Okay, let's talk about language structures, 2nd grade unit 1, lesson 2. This kind of focuses on grammar. You're reviewing inflectional endings, such as ending in S, ending in ED, or ending in ING. And these are verbs ending in S, ED, ING. So for example, the first worksheet that would go in front of the student, on the first item on that sheet, the student reads, "The dog blank when the cars drove by." In parentheses, it says past, because the student would be looking for something that occurred in the past, a past tense verb. So the choices are barks, barked, and barking. So obviously the correct answer is barked. The dog barked when the cars drove by, and that indicates past tense. So building on patterns gives us the opportunity to tailor instruction for our students who might not fit in a pretty easy box, in the way that my young friend Drew does not fit in a pretty easy box. He's a lot of different things, but building on patterns can help him out. So I would like to share with you a video of Drew. Drew and I did this activity together. In the video is kind of small, and I apologize for that. Although the small size of the video will not detract from the auditory input and the overall meaning that you will glean and the takeaways that you will have. So it's still an opportunity to demonstrate this video, this concept and this teaching experience to you. In this video, I am in a room in Drew's home. Drew and I are sitting next to each other at his kitchen table, and he has a page of Braille on the table, and he is reading that. I am kind of looking over at his hand placement and at him, and engaging in a dialogue about this grammatical exercise. The specific sentence that you will see demonstrated is, "He blank up the ball and put it away." So you will hear us talk about verb tenses, past, present, future, and obviously the correct choice is picked. The choices on the page are picks, picked, and picking. So I will go ahead and play that for you.
H. E.
What word is that?
He
Good.
blanked.
Good. He blank.
U. P.
So what word is that?
up,
Good.
the,
Good.
B-A-L-L,
So what word?
B-A-L-L,
Very good. Those are the correct letters.
L,
Ah. A says kind of ah in this sentence. I mean, in this word. All.
Ball,
And
P, U, T,
it.
A,
Mm-hmm.
W, A, Y, period.
Very good. A-W-A-Y. Do you know what word that is? Says away.
Way,
Away.
away.
So he blank up the ball and put it away. So now let's read the choices that might go with that. Blank. Okay, make sure you're reading the beginning of the word. What does it begin with?
P,
Good.
I,
Mm-hmm.
C, K, S.
Good. Ick.
X,
What is the second one?
P,
Mm-hmm.
I, C, K, N.
Ep. I says I. CK says K. And ED says D. Picked.
Pick,
Picked. Mm-hmm.
picked.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's go to the last one on that line.
P,
Mm-hmm.
I, C, K, I-N-G.
Very good.
Picking.
Picking. Way to go, man. So now we have to choose which of those goes in the blank. Thank you so much for your attention to that video of Drew. I think it beautifully illustrates the support and the activity that was right for that particular student. So I think you could tell from the video that Drew is a student who might benefit from a little bit more support in terms of collaborating and identifying phonemes. A little bit of support was needed when he went to blend the phonemes. And then he was able to apply his knowledge perfectly to complete the grammatical activity of past, present, and future tense with selecting the correct verb and verb ending. Okay, let's talk about decoding and phonics. On this activity, you have final consonants, which are doubled. So all of the words in this activity have double consonants, either double L or double S. And the goal here is to get the student to read words such as, and you'll see red stars next to hill, dull, pass, lass, and fell. And these are the words that you will see Drew read in the video in a moment. But the goal here is to get Drew to read the words, for example, hill, without saying hill. That double consonant, there might be two consonants there, two of the same, but you don't repeat the sound or produce two of the sound. It's not hill, it's just hill. So again, the words that you'll see Drew read are hill, dull, mess, pass, lass, and fell. And again, I'm sitting in the same position adjacent to him at his kitchen table. There's Braille in front of him on the table. He's reading with his hands. I'm providing support sitting next to him. And here, I'll go ahead and play that for you.
Let's read these. Try the first part of the word and tell me what letter it starts with, and that will help you read it.
H-I-L-L.
Good. Good.
H-U-L-L.
That begin with a different letter than H.
D.
Good.
U-L-L.
So how would you say it?
Dill.
U says So
Dull.
dull. Good.
P-A-S-S.
Yes. What does it say?
Pass.
Pass. Good job.
L-A-S-S.
What does it say?
Last.
Last.
Note.
Because we don't have a T or an ST contraction. Try the first letter again.
F-E-L-L.
Good.
Fell.
Fell. This is the last thing I'll ask you to do, and then you'll be done for today. I'd like for you to make a sentence with the word fell. Would you like to hear some examples first, or would you like to make yours up on your own without hearing examples?
I fell out of my chair.
Very good. Way to go, Drew. You're all done. Thank you so much.
Isn't he the sweetest, most special boy? I just love him so much. What I want you to take away from that interaction with Drew was that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay for him to make mistakes. It's okay for him to need a little bit of support in blending or isolating or identifying phonemes. If you'll notice, he identified his Braille code correctly, but the sound letter correspondence is a little bit of a challenge. It's not as automatic as it would be for a typical peer his same age. So there's just so many opportunities for support in this interaction. But I think Drew did beautifully. And at the end, I did cater the instruction to him specifically a little bit by having him come up with his own sentence. That imagination piece, that innovation, that creating of something new that's not explicitly given to him is a challenge for Drew. So letting him practice that is essential. Okay, let's talk about sight recognition with Dulce words. Dulce words, again, are words that cannot be sounded out just based on sound letter correspondence in the way that students initially learn phonemes, where the alphabetic phonemes would sound like this if we're going from A to F. A, B, F. So if I took, for example, on this page, it's words you should know. Number one has a line of several words. The first word is was. If I was decoding this in the way that a young student is with their first sound letter correspondence instruction, I would want to say was, but that word is not was, it's was. So it's a sight word. It doesn't behave. So BOT provides opportunity to practice sight words in the same way that many, many elementary students across the nations do. Nation, not nations. Okay. So with the simple view of reading, we today have illustrated language comprehension, meeting with word recognition, and coming together to form reading comprehension. Reading comprehension for this student needed to be modified due to his age and his unique interests and abilities. He needed the easier skill level and content that was decodable to him for the most part. So we took my Pug Pub and we created my wizard friend Bob. We can ask reading comprehension questions, even though we made up our own story. What is my friend's name? Bob. What kind of friend is he? Bob is a wizard. What does he have? Bob has a wand. And then if we wanted to do reading comprehension activities, we could not only ask these questions for the story that we made up, but we could also ask a question such as, what kinds of things would you do together if you had a wizard friend? And again, for a student like Drew, who really struggles with creating something that's innovative, that's based on his own personal experiences, is a challenge. It's an area of need. He needs to flex that muscle. So I provide lots of opportunities woven throughout his Braille literacy instruction to imagine and flex that kind of creative muscle and come up with scenarios that weren't explicit in the story. So let's talk about some next steps.
That is great. So this is Amy Campbell again, coming back from APH. And so we're going to explore some next steps. We have, in this past time together with this webinar, we have been talking about how to think of using pieces of building on patterns. If you could go back to the previous slide for just a moment, that's great. How to use parts of building on patterns as supplemental activities. So some of the things that we explored was, for instance, the classroom is talking about antonyms. What is it within the product building on patterns that we could pull something that's similar? It's the same topic that we're talking about, different words, but we wanted to, by sharing these ideas, demonstrate how we can take something from building on patterns and use it as a supplemental resource to something that's happening in the general education classroom. So we went through that step by step to give you some of those examples, knowing that in many classrooms, reading instruction is anchored on the simple view of reading and Scarboroughs reading rope. Those skills are intentionally taught, explicitly taught within the classroom. So hopefully that gave some ideas of how to make that work. We also talked about tailoring some examples of stories. One example that we could discuss with the Pug Pub story, maybe it's doing a brainstorming session with a student before giving it to, the student to read the story. Maybe it's thinking of all the different words and associations that have to do with dogs, and that we are guiding the discussion and the vocabulary building around some of the words that are in the story. So that would be an example to keep the original story, but find ways to supplement around it to make it even more meaningful for the student, especially if there's a student that loves their family pet. So in thinking about next steps, we are doing something very, very different. And if you could go ahead to the next slide. We want to expand the conversation. There's been some great things going into the chat window, so we want to do it a little bit different. We want to take this chat from the webinar, all about strategies for literacy achievement, and we want to head over in a moment to the Hive in order to continue the conversation. And there are some questions that we're going to delve into that will also give you extra tools and ideas to walk away from with this webinar. So if we go to the next slide, this is how we're going to do it. The very first thing is we want you to go in and access the Hive. So that is www.aphive.org. If you go into that, we've also dropped the URL into the chat, then sign into the Hive. If you forgot a password, maybe it's been a while since you've been in there, there are also, you can follow the link to reset the password. Maybe some of you, this is the very first time you've ever heard of the Hive, or you just don't have that username and password. Not a problem. In that, going to the home page, it allows you to create a username and password. Once you have created that username and password, now go into our step 2, and we have a QR code that we have on the screen, and we also just dropped into the chat window the URL. This is going to take you directly into the discussion board chat. This is a brand new feature in the APH Hive that allows us to have that reciprocal communication, that back and forth, the sharing of ideas. If you head over into the Hive and you are actually in the thread, Strategies for Literacy Achievement webinar chat, and what we will do for just a moment, if you don't mind, stop sharing, Hunter. I'm going to then screen share and show what you should be looking at. Don't worry, these links are in the chat window for you, the URLs. So if you don't have the QR code, no worries. So if I'm projecting in the right way, you are seeing what the landing page is for this thread. Stephanie Walker has already listed all the resources. Some of you said, I loved those resources. Well, we will give you access here first, here in the discussion board. Once you are in the discussion board, you can get access to all of these links that were covered in the presentation. Then you can also get in and answer those questions. I'll get back to that in just a moment. What are those questions that we want to delve into? You can have that conversation here. The whole idea is to say that this conversation, these ideas that are going in the chat window don't have to stay here within the Zoom webinar platform. It carries over into the Hive within this discussion board thread where it can always stay. Think of what ideas you would have that you've thought about today, maybe that just came to mind in thinking about the webinar content. Maybe it's things that you have already done with your students. This is the place in order that you can get in there and take a look at those things, and it's all stored. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment. And if we go into our last slide, or next to last slide, we will revisit the questions. So again, the questions that we are visiting that we would love for you to put into the discussion board here is, how do you collaborate with gen ed teachers? How do you tailor instruction to meet student unique needs? How do you partner with families and caregivers? These are all things that we would love for you to fill in and populate within the discussion board so that you actually walk away with ideas. Right now, we have 143 participants with us right now. Wouldn't it be amazing if everybody went in and put in one idea or post or reply? And here we walk away with over 100 ideas and strategies of what we can do in order to provide that Braille literacy within an itinerant role, thinking about those strategies and uses. So we hope that you will dive into and look into that discussion board, continue the conversation, and meet with us there and see in the time to come what other sorts of things might also populate.